I work quite a number of our audience is interested in the graphics. If I may have the permission of the two speakers, I may propose to have the slides, PDF of course, being allowed to distribute to whoever interested afterwards, if that's okay for our speakers, so that you don't have to rush to take all your photos. But let's focus on the discussions. Let me start with something very basic. What is the Belt and Road, or One Belt One Road? I've always been asked by many people about the numbers. Maybe I throw this number question to each of our speakers. First number question is, how many belt and how many road are there? Can I ask Dr. Zhang?
Hello? Yes. Okay. I actually been asked quite a lot about this. I think from the investor's perspective, I guess people are interested in where the authorities will pick the location to build the infrastructure projects, and then it would be good to follow the trend and make your investment around that region, I suppose. So on that ground, I think Dr. Xie actually showed several charts, right? So I think that actually I used one chart similar as yours from Xinhua agency. I think that's, I take it as official view, although I think it's more indicative, because I think this concept of One Belt, One Road is actually snowballing. So it's becoming more global than we thought in the very beginning. So as I said, projects in Brazil and South Africa, down the road it's probably going to be incorporated under this big umbrella of concept. But it's probably the maps we can take from the official media is more of the indicative projects that they already sort of have in mind, but there are probably a lot of new projects down the road.
Okay. Before you jump to answer the first question, I actually have another number question for KL. Not just the number of Belt and Road, but how many countries are there in the Belt and Road?
I'm doing tax 64, right? If we include China, it's 65 countries. Yeah, be included in the Belt and Road. Yeah, so it's a very complicated cooperation system, I think.
Okay, I can tell you my problems. I used the same answer to one of the questionnaires, and then the next question is, where's America?
I think because the Belt and Road is, by my understanding, is the Northwest cooperation. Yeah, so in the west direction, I think there's just is a Eurasian. Eurasian is the Eurasian land bridge. So that has exclude American so far, such as the TPP. The PPP is exclude China, but the Belt and Road is exclude United States.
Thanks for your answer. Actually, this to one of the questions from the floor, which is to Dr. Zhang. Is your assessment on the interrelationship or interaction between TPP and Belt and Road? And where is the US and Japan elements in these two?
Right. Yeah, so the TPP initiative nowadays is becoming very sort of topical. My sense is, my understanding is actually in Beijing, in the policy circle, there's a lot of discussion about the TPP initiative this year, particularly after, kind of surprised a bit in terms of the progress in the US. It got approved in the US. Then my sense is 2 years down the road, I think China will probably be applying for a membership in the TPP as well. It's open sort of a initiative, right? So that each country can apply, and so that I think there's actually active discussion on the benefits and of becoming a TPP member. Now, so that's interesting in actually dynamics in Asia, given that the number one country that benefit from this TPP is Vietnam, and Vietnam probably will be competing. Well, it's already kind of competing with China on some sort of labor-intensive products. So Nike shoes nowadays make more shoes in Vietnam than in China, for instance. So the TPP down the road for the next couple of years, I think it will have some interesting impact on the supply chain in East Asia. So that on the other hand, I think the China reaction is probably the extending free trade agreement within the region, trying to speed up the negotiation with Korea, Japan, and ASEAN countries to maintain its competitiveness. So it's an interesting sort of competition to set up the free trade zones.
Yes. To be honest, there are so many questions here. Actually, each paper has more than one questions. If I go through that, you will be here for dinner anyway. So forgive me, I may try to summarize and group them together. What we have just asked is about some basics of the Belt and Road, the numbers. The next set of questions actually focus on the purpose or nature of this Belt and Road. Zhiwei has just talked about the difference between the TPP and the One Belt One Road. To be simple, TPP is a pluralistic, original trade agreement with very specific understanding and rules being set among those 12 members, how to interact in the economic interactions. Whereas the Belt and Road, so far, from all our understanding, is a very vague concept, initiative, whatever you name it. Some people even say it's a dream. We talk about America's dream, we talk about China's dream, and this is one part of the China dream. Dream can come true, of course, but it may take time until you awake. But that is, some people's criticism is, unlike the TPP, which is a consensus built among a group of countries, this Belt and Road seems to be a unilateral, China-centric idea being pushed by the Chinese authority to countries around them. And there are several different arguments saying what is behind that. Some common argument is, one, the Chinese have too much spare capacity that they need to export, like steel, high-speed rail, cement, and even labor. And there are other arguments saying that not just because they have too much spare capacity, they are running short of market to sell their products. So they're looking for market to sell the products. And the third thing is that they are running short of resources to fuel the machinery. So they are looking for areas to support their own growth. So all this coming from a point that the Chinese doing this for themselves. I trust our speakers not agree with it, and I don't agree with it anyway, but let's our two speakers explain to you how they think, what is right, what is wrong about this kind of argument. KL?
Yeah, of course, I think what you say is all are right, yeah, I think. But officially, I think they identify four purposes to promote the Belt and Road, including the economic exchange, cultural exchange, the four purposes. But I have my own version of the purpose of the Belt and Road. That's including, I think it's a good to boost the world economic recovery. I mean, also can, I think through improvement in infrastructure, can promote the regional economic cooperation, and especially the trade and logistics. I think to lift the intact connectivity to a high level. Yeah. And then, of course, it's also, I think, good for RMB's low RMB's programs of internalization. And also, of course, it's also, I think, can help to enhance the cultural exchange. So this is my version of the purpose of the Belt and Road. But of course, if you think it's also good, because now, today, I think it's not only China, but all over the world are suffering from the overcapacity, excess of capacity here. But there is, I think some capacities are not really overcapacity, because if we can, we see actually there are a lot of needs in different area or in underdeveloped area. They actually need to attract the investment to improve their infrastructure, especially the countries in the Middle Asia, in the West Asia. Yeah. So I think Belt and Road is just the concept to promote or to push the infrastructure investment. Yeah. So if we can do this, it's also good for us to, I think, to absorb the problem of the overcapacity, so the world economy can benefit from this.
Zhiwei, do you have any?
Yeah, so I think there, maybe take the title of the presentation. I think there's a gravity perspective. I think it's natural for China to play a bigger role in internationally. If anything, I got a bit surprised. If we look at the sort of the past decade of data, China intentionally, I think, took or avoided taking a proactive role in the previous administration, right, before 2012. And what China doing now under the new leadership, the AIIB, the SDR, the One Belt One Road initiative, I would say they're consistent with the economic fundamentals. It's more a reflection, a natural reflection of the economic gravity that China represents these days in the world. And there are different ways this gravity can show up in the world. They can. I think the overnight this ITR inclusion shows a sort of a collaborative way that I think it's a very positive gesture from the sort of international organization to welcome renminbi be included there, and but that also reflects the economic importance of the country. So in that sense, I think I take the One Belt One Road initiative as a sort of a natural policy to do. The other thing to emphasize is a mutual beneficiary, right? So that is look at South Asia, look at Pakistan, Bangladesh, the ports there were not developed. I worked in the IMF for 6 years. I went to developing countries, Western Africa, in Asia as well, some of the poorest countries, and I can tell that the infrastructure investment, what a difference can it make, right? And given the current sort of low interest rate environment with the Chinese capacity to build railways, I mean, if we can build more railways for those countries, help those poor people to get out of the poverty trap, why not? I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing to happen. I think these issues probably focusing more on the exporting sort of excess capacity as the single sort of motivation, I think is probably narrow-minded.
Okay, thanks. Actually, if I may chip in, even though I'm a moderator, forgive me, it's a topic I'm talking about every day. That it's very important that Zhiwei point out that it's a mutually beneficial type of, even though it's raised or proposed by China, at the end, if a project can work or can only work if it is mutually beneficial. Talking about excess capacity, actually I heard a story recently which may be interesting. When we think about excess capacity, we may be thinking more from the China or developed countries' point of view, where too much supply and too little demand. But when you go beyond this area into even Southeast Asia, a friend of mine who was in the steel business, he went to Southeast Asia and he said that they are really short of capacity. They are importing several million tons of steel every year. They're short of steel. So the spare capacity in one place could be a complement to the shortage of capacity in other places. So exporting spare capacity may not be a bad idea if it's mutually beneficial. So that's why we think that even though it may be right in the perception that it is a China proposed idea, at the end of the day, if it works, it has to be mutually beneficial. And from here, I want to take to another point of question. Where is Hong Kong's role? What we can do to make it work for not just China, but all those parties. Gail?
Actually, my presentation has touched Hong Kong's role. Yeah.
That's why
Yeah. I think I will only repeat my viewpoint. Is I think our key role, our major role is to provide the financial services. Yeah, because we are IFC. Yeah, we have disadvantages. Yeah.
Can I play a role of not just moderator but also commentator? I get a feeling there's professional bias here, because all three of us have worked or is still working with financial institutions. So we actually promote finance as Hong Kong's strength. And talking about infrastructure, if I may ask you one question. We all know about our expertise in building high-speed rail in Hong Kong. We usually can exceed our budget by easily 1/3. So if the calculation is that Asia needs about 6 trillion or whatever in infrastructure financing, and if it's being handled by Hong Kong management, which is supposed to be super, then likely we will over budget by 1/3, we'll make it 8 trillion, and then we'll make good business for our financial sector also. Is that the way we should contribute to One Belt One Road? Zhiwei?
Oops. Yeah, so actually, you know, I've been thinking, I mean, in different sort of occasions that I've been asked, what does it mean for Hong Kong? And my way to take it, I mean, Hong Kong has been more, I would say the financial market is more driven by the equity market rather than bond market. And if you look around the world, I mean, Hong Kong compared with US, with New York and London, I think the key difference is also the focus more on the equity rather than on the fixed income. Whereas infrastructure, I would say, is more about fixed income, right? More about bonds. So this could be an opportunity, I think, within Asia, that if there's a wave of infrastructure investment coming in, it's more likely to be bond driven. So it's an opportunity for Hong Kong to become more balanced. And I think for mainland China as well, my expectation is in the next 5-10 years, I think China's bond market will be doing very well, and there will be a huge expansion of the domestic bond market, and how can China fit? So how can Hong Kong fit into the sort of the China's capital market development? You know, the SDR inclusion. SDR is more about the bond market, right? So it's about, you know, global central banks buying Chinese bonds. So I'm actually more positive on the bond market outlook than the equity market outlook. Actually, it's from an onshore perspective in the next 3 to 4 years. So how does Hong Kong can sort of strengthen its role in that bond market development? I think this is a opportunity, and it's also a challenge.
Because the daughter comes from the fixed income development. So
it also reminds me about our latest news about our high-speed rail financing, that the management company is going to borrow money to pay out extra dividends to cover the extra budget. So it all involves different kinds of capital market activities. Beyond that, actually, there's another more common question about the Belt and Road, asked by probably many of you, and including many of TDC's clients, is was it for the small and medium enterprises? If all you talk about is mega projects, won by huge state-owned companies or large consulting and engineering firms, financial and banks, so where the SME can benefit from this initiative?
Yeah, this is a question I always been asked, but yeah, I see because most of the enterprise in Hong Kong are actually small and medium-sized company, and they always ask me, and it sounds the BNO has a huge opportunities, but I don't know how to involve, how to engage with the BNO. So I also have a no.
Maybe
no
I
answer.
should do some
no
promotion
answer.
here.
Yeah, but I think definitely, such as to build a high-speed grid. Yeah, this is nothing to do with the small and medium-sized company, but it should be led by China's state-owned enterprise. Yeah, because only those companies has qualified to take this risk. Actually, on my personal view, it is a very high risk investment, and so but as the SME, they actually can see the opportunity of such as how can I produce some supplementary products. Yeah, because if you build a high-speed grid, such from China to Europe, I think the length of the railway is as long as over 1 trillion kilometers, right? So it needs a lot of supplementary products. I think this may be the opportunities for the SME factories. Maybe they can do.
Zhiwei?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very challenging actually for the SMEs. I think they're probably, the first stage of this kind of a development on the frontier, probably more driven by the government initiatives. So the SOEs, the large companies, they will take they have the capacity to take more risks, and they can be the first wave of explorers, and then. But these regions will be developed. So think about Shenzhen or some of the sort of coastal regions in China. They after the infrastructure gets built up, the entrepreneurs, they will find out a way to explore those opportunities. And one area that we started to see some signs of development in South Asia, for instance, is tourism, right? So that in some of the, say, Sri Lanka, some regions that some of the, once the infrastructure is set up, you started to see business opportunities coming up, and then entrepreneurs would take initiative proactively.
Okay. Forgive me if I can do some propaganda promotion, because we were asked the same question so many times also. And if you have time, you can just search our research web. We have quite a number of articles actually talking about that. What is the opportunities? What is it for SMEs in the Belt and Road Initiative? But I will summarize 3 traps which I have used here. And unfortunately, I have no time to communicate with my 2 speakers before the panel. The first trap normally in One Belt, One Road is it an economic or political idea? Many people see it as non-economic. But Dr. Zhiwei have made it very clear. There's an economic impact and economic sense behind it, which we should focus. The second trap is about my first question. What does it cover? Where does it cover? The area. In fact, it should not be just 64 countries, from my understanding. I verified it with my trip last week in Beijing, with all 3 ministries and the State Council Research Institute. They all come up and say that 64 countries around China is just an idea for you to at least to know what we are talking about, but not limited to those countries. It is around the world. Whoever thinks there's an interest and find it mutually beneficial is welcome to join. So friends in America, friends in Africa, friends in Antarctica are welcome to join. And I volunteer myself to first make a trip there to study.
So it is actually an open cooperation system. Okay.
Yes. And the third trap is about the sectors. So much focus is on infrastructure, so that we all think that it's a business for the big companies, big banks. In fact, if you look at those countries' sectors, it's all around. It's not just infrastructure. It's trading, it's relocation of factories, it's selling and buying commodities, everything. So SMEs who specialize in those areas have your opportunities. It's just how you take on these opportunities, riding on the Belt and Road Initiative, riding on different policy and regulations. Sorry that I overdo my moderator work, but I'm afraid that I'm doing something politically incorrect, so I have to do my promotion here. But one very important question, which were repeatedly asked by the floor, is what's the exchange rate of RMB likely under this Belt and Road and the recent SDR development? What's your prediction? I think there's quite a number of audience who have been longing on RMB or sorting on RMB, who would like where to extend or cut the position. Let's make use of these two experts. Zhiwei, you want to comment on that first?
Sure. Yeah. We get asked quite a lot these days. The short answer is in terms of the forecast. So the end of the year forecast, we're looking at CNH. This is onshore market close rate. So we're looking at 6.4 by the end of the year, and 6.7 the year next 2016. So it's a little bit of a depreciation against the U.S. dollar, but against most other currencies is still appreciation. So that's our house view, and I would say there's forecasting currencies is a funny business, and a very wide confidence interval attached to it. I think there's a lot of investors out there. I would say particularly probably outside Asia, expect more depreciation of renminbi against U.S. dollar. I think the key sort of a wild card that play sort of a critical role on the margin is a SDR inclusion, how much capital inflow it will generate in the next couple of years, and I think this could be big, right? So that the global central banks, if they relocate their assets, if you look at the weight of the renminbi in the SDR basket, is close to 11%, and then the euro and the British pound, their weights got cut quite a bit, right? And those weights got redistributed to renminbi, right? So if the global central banks take that as a benchmark, relocate their reserve currency, reserve assets, you would have quite a bit of a capital inflow going into China to buy Chinese government bonds, right? In the next, and this is a structural, right? So 5 years kind of outlook, and that would support the currency. So that, I think that's probably the most important sort of uncertainty, how much of this capital inflow will materialize down the road. And I think the Chinese authorities actually extending this boundary, and not only the central banks nowadays, the sovereign wealth funds, globally, sovereign wealth funds can buy Chinese onshore fixed income assets, bonds and currency as well, actually, interbank, without a quota, right? So that's a big deal. I mean, that's a huge opening up that happened in July this year. Now, it hasn't really caused a big inflow yet, reason being the onshore market, the bond market is a new sort of is a new territory for, and it's completely new for foreign reserve managers. For them to make investment, they need to set up the infrastructure, they need to hire the PMs, they need to go through risk management, fund the custodian banks. There are a lot of things they need to do, but it's only a matter of time. And with renminbi in the SDR basket, with a weight as the third largest reserve asset in that basket, it's going to be difficult for central banks globally not to allocate at all to that asset. And the current weight in the central bank's reserve management, the renminbi asset weight is 0, right? So they don't have to move to 11% in a short period of time, but even moving from 0, say, to 1%, 2%, global reserve assets is huge, right? So that allocation in US dollar terms can still be a big deal. And is structural. Structural means you can expect in the next several years, similar kind of inflow might happen. So these have a big deal on financial market in terms of how to formulate expectation on the currency and how fast this can happen. That's a big uncertainty. So my expectation is beginning of next year, first half of next year, we will see central banks increasing their reserve assets in the SDR because they build up the team, they started to feel more comfortable to buy that asset. And it also depends on the onshore market. The bond market has not been developed to such a stage ready for the global reserve managers. I mean, you need to have reserve assets. Basically means you need to be liquid. So why U.S. Treasury is such a good reserve asset because you can sell a huge amount in a short period of time, and the bid-ask spread is very small, so that transaction cost is low, so you can take it out if you want it. And renminbi asset is not there yet because in the past the bond market it's more like a buy and hold kind of asset. The bid-ask spread is pretty high, so that the market needs to be developed. But I think it's only a matter of time. It's a full commitment from the PBOC. We can see that the bond market is moving in that direction. So I'm not terribly bearish on the currency if you take a 2-year, 3-year perspective because of this inflow that potentially be coming in.
Kyo, any comment?
Yeah, just a few points to add. I think in general, the RMB being inclusive in SDR is very good for RMB. But regarding of its impact on exchange rate, in the short term, it's still, I think, look at the market forces. Because one, the China economist slowing down. The second is the US dollar is too strong. So it is not RMB is too weak, but the US dollar is too strong. So in the short term, I still see the downward pressure of the RMB exchange rate is still there. But in the long run, I'm quite confident the RMB can still keep hard currencies. Yeah.
Thank you. I think a simple summarization is, in the long run, hold on. But there's also another saying, in the long run, we may be all dead. Thank you very much.